Trading in crypto still largely happens off-chain. A lot of volume sits on centralized exchanges, even as more assets and activity move on-chain. Bringing that activity on-chain raises questions around execution, liquidity, and how markets actually function at scale. Today's guest is Simon Jones, co-founder and CEO of Reya. Reya is building a trading system anchored to Ethereum, designed to support high-performance trading while keeping settlement on-chain. Simon, welcome to Token for Your Thought.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's great to have you on the podcast. So before we get into all things Reya, it would be great to start with a bit about you and your background. What were you doing before crypto?
Yeah, I mean, my story, it depends how far you want to go back, but
Okay.
I basically came out of university and went to McKinsey and very, very quickly realized that I absolutely hated that. So I
Really?
left within, I think, about 3 months. Went and I'm abbreviating ever so slightly, but I then went and just started my first business.
Oh my
And
gosh.
that was, about 10 years ago at this point. And from then to now, I've actually done 4 different businesses, all of which have been financial technology. And the first 2 were traditional Web 2 fintech. And then the more recent 2 have been, kind of like DeFi projects.
Okay, wow, interesting. 3 months. So did you did you always think you would start a business, or were you kind of
No.
surprised when you were like, okay, I'm going to start a business? I don't know.
Yeah, this is what I'm saying is it depends how far you want to go back. So
Okay.
I actually had got into university to go study architecture,
hmm
and pretty much through my entire teenage life, all I wanted to do is be an architect.
Wow.
Then just before university, kind of giving away my age here, but just before university, global financial crisis kicked off. And I remember thinking at the time, I was like, hold on a minute, like, why am I going to study architecture when there's all this kind of like crazy stuff that can go on in the world that
hmm
literally impacts everybody?
Yeah.
And that's the point where I switched from architecture to economics. He's probably too young to really realize it at the time, but I think that's the point where my brain started going, well, actually, why don't I try and build a financial system or kind of financial technology products that actually help essentially democratize access to financial services to people. And that, if I look back over the past 10 years, has pretty much been my North Star.
Okay, wow. Yeah, that's awesome that you sort of ran towards that and weren't like, well, I don't want to do anything in finance because things are a bit rocky right now.
Yeah, well, I wanted to do stuff in finance, but just not at the banks. It was like, how
Right.
do I build something that's separate to that? Yeah,
Yeah, and like a solution for it. That's a
exactly.
I love that perspective to that. And when you say architect, it makes me think, well, you're not building, buildings or structures, but you're sort of building businesses. So maybe there's synergy there
There's a,
somewhere.
yeah, there's definitely something comparable.
hmm
Sorry, this is getting way off topic, but I still love architecture.
hmm
I still think it is the one. This is very deep. It's like a form of creative expression in many ways.
hmm
And it is the one which touches the most people. Like the
hmm
people who designed the Colosseum, you still go look at that today. Like billions of people look at that.
Yeah.
Whereas a business can impact massively people and it can change
hmm
the way the world works. But fast forward 1,000 years from now, like the business probably won't exist.
Yeah. No, it's a really good point. It's definitely a very cool legacy to have, being involved in a physical structure that, like you said, can go beyond and, outlive generations. Yeah, no, I like that perspective. And I like kind of going back a bit because I think it can really help understand how people think. And it's always really interesting, seeing what brought people to where they are now, and how they came about, with the ideas to decide to build a business, or, how you came about deciding what problems to tackle. So that totally makes sense if you were thinking about your future during the financial crisis. Um, okay, very cool. And so you're at McKinsey 3 months in. So what I mean, that's like, I like the decisiveness of it, but were you just like, did you not like sort of the corporate structure? Were you looking to sort of more freedom to sort of build your own thing? Like, what made you transition out
Uh,
of corporate?
Yeah, I think it still comes back to just if you kind of tie together the architecture and the kind of like financial crisis stuff, it just comes back to how can you actually impact the world?
Hmm.
I was looking at what I was doing as a junior consultant, where you're working till midnight, at
Gosh.
least midnight every single night, doing stupid PowerPoint decks that like people probably don't even read.
Wow.
And I was just like, this is not a good use of time.
My goodness.
And don't get me wrong, like it's an incredible company and
Yeah.
it's incredible training ground. Like
Hmm.
people go there, they do a few years, they learn a lot, and then they typically move on.
Hmm.
But I just didn't want to spend the time. I kind of knew that I wanted to start a business, and the business I ended up starting was based on the kind of like problem space that I had been working in whilst I was at McKinsey.
Hmm.
And that was like the trigger for the idea. And then that's basically what I went and set up.
Okay, wonderful. And how was your first journey into entrepreneurship?
Yeah, the first one wasn't good.
Lots of
The-
learnings.
yeah. So out of those four, the first one didn't work, but I learned a ton. And
Nice.
what I was very grateful for is we also had an incredible team. So my co-founder left Google to come start that business with me.
Wow.
Our he- Ironically, our head of marketing, who I hired from somewhere else, then went on to become a junior partner at McKinsey.
Oh,
So it's a bit
that's
circular.
funny. Yeah.
Um, but yeah, it wasn't successful, learned a lot, but took those learnings into the second one,
Hmm.
which was a lot more successful. There was an AI business before AI was as cool as it is today.
Wow.
And yeah, that ended up being bought by one of the banks. And that sale coincided just at the same time as DeFi summer.
Wow.
So that was then kind of like perfect timing for me, really, who'd been very close to crypto for a long time,
Hmm.
to look at the space and go, oh, actually, hold on a minute. There's actual genuine financial innovation taking place here. Like, I want to be part of that. And that's then when I went all in and started a project in this space.
Oh, right. Okay. That was going to be my next question. What sort of brought you into crypto? But you said you'd been close to the space for a while. So was that, how did that come about?
So, I mean, just the whole financial crisis,
Hmm.
kind of what's going on in the financial world. Surely there's got to be a better way of building a financial system. Bitcoin comes out.
Yeah.
Bitcoin Genesis block is like,
Yeah.
very much like anti-bank. Is almost impossible for someone with my like kind of history to not be interested in what was going on.
Hmm.
And for me, it was always about, well, when is the technology going to get to the point that I can start building something?
Hmm.
Right? Like I can see how Bitcoin is interesting. Now Ethereum has come out and I can see how that's going to evolve, but like when is it going to get to the point that I actually can start building something? And that was what DeFi Summer really triggered in my mind. It's like, oh, hold on a minute, like now's the time. And for me, that just happened to coincide perfectly with his sale, so I could then kind of move on very quickly into another project.
Nice. Yeah, it's nice hearing stories about when timing lines up. I've had guests on the show where, they talk about their journey and it's like they had a good idea, but the timing was just off. And if, they would have launched it during, um, just a different market, it's like, oh man, you were too early for that. Or if that would have been a couple of years later. So it's nice to hear when the timing lines up. So how did the idea for Raya come about?
So if you think about these two DeFi projects that I've done, Raya is impossible to explain the genesis of that without explaining the first. And
Okay.
the first was a project called Vault, which was the world's first interest rate swap DEX. So we literally invented interest rate swaps on the blockchain for the first time.
Very
Um,
cool.
yeah, and that project grew in 2022 to be the third biggest DEX in the space. So there's
Wow.
Uniswap, DYDX, and then there was Volt.
Yeah.
And for anyone that knows financial instruments, these are very different products. Like one was spot markets, the other was perpetuals, and then Volts was interest rate swaps. It's very different instruments.
Mhm.
But nevertheless, gives you an idea of the adoption. but it was through doing that I started to realize actually fixed income, which is what an interest rate swap is, that is not the entry point to building infrastructure that can be adopted by traditional finance and actually start displacing large swathes of infrastructure that exist in traditional finance. It's just like, it's always, fixed income is always going to be the slowest moving piece out of all of those components.
Okay.
And that's what then drove my thinking of, well, am I working on the right thing?
Hmm.
And it, I basically made a decision end of 2024 to sunset vaults and actually start this new idea I had for Reya, where, to answer your actual question,
Yeah.
Reya is a perp and spot DEX. And what's very unique about what we're doing is we figured out how to address what I kind of consider as the holy grail of DEX design, where we're able to exist natively on chain and have the security benefits associated with a distributed network, whilst also being um, sub microsecond level fast in terms of execution speed. And just to explain those two things, what we're
Hmm.
basically saying is we're fast, but we're also decentralized, and these two things are conflicting from an engineering perspective.
Yeah.
But the value to it for a user's perspective is that in order to compete with the infrastructure that exists in traditional finance, you have to be as fast as the infrastructure that already exists there. That's really important for trading. But to actually leverage any of the benefits associated with um, blockchain-based technology, you have to be able to exist natively on chain. And therefore, by definition, you have to exist on a distributed network. So we've been able to solve those two things and actually therefore build an exchange that, yeah, is fast enough for TradFi, but has the security benefits associated with being on chain.
Amazing. And how do you achieve those things? Can you talk us through the architecture of that?
You want yeah, I mean, how deep do you want me to go?
Like on a
Where's
surface level.
the edge?
Yeah. Like,
Yeah. So, um, I'm trying to think where to start. So you attempts at building like fast but on chain have historically resulted in some sort of trade-off. Like, in order to gain speed, people have often had to centralize large components of the network.
hmm.
And by centralizing it just means that you're basically moving onto an AWS server that you control.
Hmm.
Right. Like, so you immediately then start to lose the security benefits associated with being distributed. Or people have gone, no, 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 we want to remain distributed and provide those kind of like security benefits. But by definition, we're going to be slower. And what we thought is that, kind of at the outset of building Rare, is that there has to be a solution to this problem. And the way that we have solved that is by building on top of Ethereum. So we're able to leverage the economic security associated with Ethereum's like almost 1 million validators.
Hmm.
But then through a based roll-up architecture, which I can explain, we are then able to create these layer 2 nodes
Hmm.
that exist on top of Ethereum, where trading always takes place against a single node at a point in time. So that single node therefore can be lightning fast, right, and provide lightning fast execution speed through to end users, whilst also inheriting the economic security associated with those million Ethereum validators. And
Nice.
that allows us to marry the kind of like fast but decentralized.
Awesome. Yeah. It's a great,
Does that make
great
sense?
solution. Yeah. No, I think you explained it well. Yeah. It's just interesting to know sort of, yeah, like how you've achieved that, like on the tech front. But yeah, definitely an elegant solution. So who is Raya built for? Who is using it?
Yeah, so I mean, we've got various different users, and very broadly that buckets into institutional users and retail users.
Hmm.
Uh, Obviously, retail users is probably the most well known in terms of who exists on chain today, right?
Hmm.
Like, there's quite a lot of retail traders on all sorts of different kind of like trading products that exist throughout DeFi. And I think one of the core value propositions to them is being able to provide them with access to the ability to trade, right? And to be the ability to trade a whole spectrum of different assets, which they might not be able to get access to elsewhere. But actually, our product and the value proposition of our product of being fast but secure, that has a kind of very strong pitch through to an institutional audience.
Hmm.
And what we are seeing, and really what we're kind of like leading with at this point in time, is like a kind of a very strong institutional push where there are very large trading firms that exist in traditional finance who have all sorts of strategies they want to deploy on kind of low latency venues. And what we have been able to do is, because we're creating a low latency venue for them to trade on, they're actually able to start migrating a lot of those strategies onto Reya and therefore on chain. And it's very simple way of categorizing the institutional bucket. There's many different variations of that,
Hmm.
but it's by far our fastest growing segment, which is the institutional side.
Wow. Yeah, that's awesome. That's yeah, really interesting. Um, so you talked about capital leaving Ethereum to trade. What are you seeing there? And what are people misunderstanding about why that happens?
Yes, there's kind of like this structural disconnect at the moment with Ethereum. So you've got a situation where about 70% of all DeFi TVL lives on Ethereum. And I think if you go a layer deeper than that, I think it's about 60% of all stable coins are on Ethereum,
Hmm.
and 75% of all tokenized RWA assets are on Ethereum.
Wow.
But the disconnect is that only 3% of all perp trading is on Ethereum.
Wow.
So you've got a situation where these institutions, so like BlackRock, like Franklin Templeton, they're happy issuing and creating assets that live on Ethereum. But whenever an institution wants to trade, they're actually moving their assets and kind of conducting that activity elsewhere.
Hmm.
And the reason for that is pretty clear. Like Ethereum was never built for trading,
Yeah.
but the impact is huge because these institutions have got comfortable with Ethereum. It's like been around for 10 years. It's never any downtime. It's got the biggest economic security out of any proof of stake chain. So they're comfortable with Ethereum,
Hmm.
but they're having to kind of break a whole load of those kind of like guarantees in order to then go and like execute their trading elsewhere. And all this really does is it just holds institutions back. And what we're doing with through our architecture is, yes, it solves the problem of being fast and decentralized, but critically in the decentralized kind of side of the value prop, like that's actually inheriting all of the things that make Ethereum great into the Rare product. So from an institutional perspective, yeah, like when I'm talking about the institutional side of the product growing faster than anything else, is because we are able to offer all of these security guarantees that Ethereum has, and also offer them the speed to execute their trading activity.
Nice. Yeah, that makes sense. And so, if someone's trading on Raya versus a centralized exchange, will it feel different? Will it be similar, like on the UX side, or is it different?
Yes, it's very interesting. From a volume perspective, we have two different routes in which you can come into the product. You can either come through the app, which I think for a kind of a normal retail user is the kind of most common path. They come to the app, they kind of play around with the app, they execute trades on the app, or you can trade programmatically. Um, like clearly, the user experience of the app is as close as you can get it to a centralized exchange. Right, like at that point, the product is somewhat commoditized. Like as long as it does what people expect, that's kind of great.
Yeah.
But what we've actually seen is that volume on Rare, probably about 6 months ago, is about 80% through the app and about 20% through programmatically, so through the API. And as we've been rolling out kind of more updates to the product, and as the product has been shifting more and more towards the architecture which I'm describing, like what we've actually seen is that that ratio has started to change. And
Huh.
as of today, about 80% of all the volume comes through programmatic traders,
Okay.
and 20% of the volume comes through the app. And one thing which actually is very interesting on top of all of this is how Claude and basically agentic trading has started to blow up.
Yeah.
And we actually know retail users who used to trade on the app, but because they can now figure out with Claude how to trade programmatically, they themselves have shifted across to being programmatic. So I mean, you mentioned UX, like obviously the UX of the app is as close as you can imagine to like Binance, but actually the way in which users are interacting with the exchange is actually shifting so that more and more of them are being programmatic in the way that they're trading.
Okay. Wow, that is really interesting. Yeah, the onset of AI and yeah, agentic trading is definitely an interesting space right now, and growing hugely. And so, what are the other? How are people using the programmatic trading like through the API? Is it projects like wanting to offer like their own trading platform or how else is that being used?
Yeah, so people can plug into the API and then build their own trading experience on top of it. And
Mhm.
we've had people come through in the past and do that. I've got to be honest that some of that has kind of like died out. Like there were people that were building front ends on top of Rare, and certainly as the market's turned, just the number of teams who are actively doing that type of stuff has definitely kind of like died.
Okay.
I think part of that is also because most people just come to Rare. So, like,
Right.
are you actually gonna
Yeah.
be able to build a better UX than the one that we already have? Like, what's the value of having another front end? But no, I mean, the reason there have been more and more programmatic traders is in part because we've built stuff that has made it easier for people to do that. But the other part, I think, is there is a significant shift where people are using things like Claude
Mhm.
to figure out how to trade programmatically themselves. What used to be the case is you had to be a developer in order to be able to kind of trade in that way. And Claude is sort of like bridging that gap where all of a sudden you don't have to be a developer, but you can access the exchange through this kind of like programmatic route.
Mhm.
And significantly, the benefit, like if you think about we're fast but decentralized, was speed. If you're just clicking around on the app, like there's a point at which the speed becomes unnoticeable. An incremental increase in speed is not noticeable.
Mhm.
But if you're trading programmatically, actually the speed is very much noticeable. So what's quite interesting for us as a product is that there's this directional shift where people are not interacting through apps, they're interacting through agents. And actually our product is a product that if you are interacting through an agent, you are able to kind of reap more of the value of the product anyway. So
Okay, interesting.
there's kind of like this very interesting
Mhm.
combination of trends taking place at the moment.
Definitely. So that shift, the 80% then you're attributing that mainly to AI, the use or you the use through
And
like Claude.
there's a proportion of it.
Okay.
Yeah, no, I think that that was happening. It was about Q4 last year where Claude started getting really good, but there's a proportion which is related to that. I think there's another proportion which is that we've been building stuff to make it easier for people to trade programmatically.
Okay. Awesome. And when it comes to trading infrastructure, what do you think people think might matter, but actually doesn't, and vice versa? What would you say really matters?
Well, I think it depends on the user,
Mhm.
right? Like there's yeah, I think honestly, I think it depends on the user. Like if you're an institution, you care about speed,
Mhm.
you care about determinism, um, you care about liquidity conditions, you care about the microstructure design, like how are you architecting it to favor maker strategies versus take strategies. Um, if you're a retail user and you're just using the app, you kind of, for the most part, you care about having the right markets available, um, and you just want to make sure that it always works. Right, that's kind of like what you really care about.
Mhm.
So there's definitely different things with different user groups. The thing which I think is something we're about to make a big push on through this year is actually expanding the asset mix away from just crypto assets. Um,
Interesting.
so, so we've seen this already start to play out with some exchanges
Yeah.
in DeFi, and it's going to be a really big thing for us for the second part of the year, where we're going to be pushing a lot of what we describe as RWA perps, so real world asset perps, so things like gold, silver,
Yeah.
other commodities, equities, etc.
Mhm.
And what's quite interesting for this is it's actually also bringing the reason I got onto that from the user perspective is it's actually bringing a different type of user into the space. So you have people who trade on like platforms in kind of like the Web 2 or TradFi world,
Mhm.
and they're actually kind of realizing that the perpetual future is in many respects is like is actually a better product than a kind of a CFD, so contract for difference. And we're actually able to start marketing to those users and bring them into the space. Yeah, I think over the next 2 years, that combined with agentic trading is
Mhm.
actually going to be where a lot of the growth starts to exist. It kind of in terms of how volume is growing, how users are interacting with products, and kind of like the type of users that we're bringing into the space.
Mhm. Oh, very cool. Yeah, I think it's awesome when there are different, asset classes available, on these platforms, and that's really interesting that you're saying, could bring in like a different user group. So yeah, that sounds like an exciting development. So your first startup, you said, you learned a lot. If you could go back, do you think there's anything different you would do? Um, through when you first started building Reya, or were there any like challenges that you came across that were particularly hard to solve? What was that kind of like, going back to actually building the platform?
That's an interesting question. I mean, there's almost certainly like hundreds of things I do different, but I'm trying to think. I'm trying to think. Like, as you go along, you just as you set out, you clearly don't have perfect information. Like you know where you want to go, you're just not sure exactly how you're going to get there.
Yeah.
And the only way to get there is to take the first step. Um,
Mhm.
and by taking that first step, you kind of figure out what the next step is and figure out the next step. And it may be that you kind of like zigzag and get your way there, but you still get there. And whilst that's like a very abstract way of answering it, if I were to rewind time and start the whole thing again, do I think we could get to where we are in half the time? Like,
Mhm.
probably, just because I'd have all the information about what I need to do.
Yeah.
Um, but it's also very like that scenario is also very hypothetical because you kind of
Mhm.
have to go through that journey in order to get the answers and the information you need to keep progressing.
Yeah, that's true.
Um, but yeah, no, the journey is part of the fun as well. So
Mhm.
just by going through that journey, it's actually quite enjoyable.
Yeah, that's true. You sort of have like trial and error stages, or yeah, things that might go wrong, but then it actually reveal like a solution or a better way of doing things, and you get those like aha moments. So yeah, I think that's a really good point. Yeah, a lot of the times it's about the journey. Was there anything that I guess surprised you about building Raya, or were there any like misconceptions that you had that were sort of proved wrong?
I think that if I talk about the journey and the learnings, right, we have not got to the answer that we've got to. Um, sorry, what's a better way of describing this? The architecture that we now have, which delivers this value through to users, it took multiple iterations to get there. And there definitely was a point around 12 months ago where we'd spent a lot of time working on what I would describe as the first version of the product. And we did that version to generate the learnings to get to what we have now. And about 12 months ago, there's a point where it just all suddenly clicked. It all clicked in terms of what the architecture should look like and what we needed to build to deliver the value. And sort of when you have that, as you described, aha moment,
Yeah.
yeah, it's quite like an enjoyable point in time. And it's not just for me, obviously, it's for everybody across the whole company of like, okay, fine, we've gone through this process. We've now figured out exactly what it is we need to build in order to deliver the value that we want to deliver. And now we can just set about kind of upgrading the product to get to that state.
Mhm. Yeah, that makes sense. And then looking ahead, where do you see on-chain markets going? So you talked about, how platforms like Claude have really changed how people are using Raya. Another thing that people are talking about is headless merchants. I just read about that platform that went live, and there were already like, I forget the numbers, but it was like tens of thousands of trades just between, AI agents, not even involving people. And people are talking about, crypto being the payments layer for AI and AI agents. What are you seeing with that? And like how far off do you think we are from that becoming a reality?
I mean, I think it's going to over the next 2 years.
Mhm.
But but basically, the trend that I expect to see happen is that people will not interact with apps; they'll interact through agents.
Mhm.
and that's going to be across everything. Now, you want to book a flight, you won't go to booking.com or whatever it is that you might use. You just won't do it. You go to Claude.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and and that's true, universally true of every single product that I think exists. So if you really wind back, right, there was this point where mobile suddenly, Apple kind of released the iPhone, and couple of years passed, they released the App Store, and then boom, like there's this huge explosion in terms of mobile applications, and you had a whole load of businesses that emerged, like Robinhood,
Mm-hmm.
like Revolut, that were kind of like that wave of uh, innovation at that point in time. But honestly, if someone were to come to me now saying I'm building a mobile bank, I'd just be like, you're just behind the times, right? Like no one's
Mm-hmm.
going to interact through their mobile; they're going to interact with an agent, and crypto is very uniquely positioned to win in that space. And I think that's true from a trading perspective. I think it's true from a payments perspective. I think it's true from the way in which we can support e-commerce, right? Like I think just literally every single part of the kind of the financial stack is going to kind of the innovation that exists in crypto is going to be accelerated off the back of this trend of people moving from app to agent. And from a Reya perspective, we obviously just want to be positioned at the front of that.
Yeah, absolutely. So how are you going about doing that?
Yeah, I mean, the starting point is to have infrastructure that actually has value, demonstrably different value to somebody who is interacting with it through an agent. And when it comes to trading, it is kind of fundamentally true that people want security guarantees and they want speed.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I think we've already seen this huge shift of people trading through the app starting to trade programmatically.
Mm-hmm.
And as more and more people use agents themselves, actually that trend I expect to continue.
Mm-hmm.
And the rare value proposition relative to other exchanges that exists is just demonstrably higher for somebody interacting through an agent.
Mm-hmm.
There's definitely one part of it, but the other part is that if you think about somebody who's interacting through an agent, by definition, Claude is using like a generalizable LLP,
Mm-hmm.
sorry, LLM. And what we're doing at the moment is we're creating infrastructure that can actually help those agents understand how they can interface with Rare as an exchange, such that it further kind of reduces the barrier for kind of like a user who's interacting through Claude to actually start executing different trades on Rare.
Okay. Yeah, because that was gonna be
But
my carry on.
there's a very long way of saying there's a lot going on.
Yeah, no, definitely. Such interesting times. Sort of, yeah, very everything's changing. Well, that was gonna be my next question is, yeah, do you see people kind of directing agents to say, "Hey, I want you to go trade this on Raya," or do you see the agents
People are
deciding or both? Like,
well, people. It's the first people are already doing.
mhm, yeah,
We know that.
mhm.
Um,
But like in
and
2
that's
years'
this point.
time.
But I think in 2 years' time, yeah. I mean, just um, I think the idea that you could tell an agent, "Make me money," and it goes and makes you money. I think that's like um, that assumes that there's enough alpha in the market that every single agent in the world is able to extract that alpha to generate. Because
Mhm,
everything's zero sum, right? Like
mhm,
it's that's never going to happen. Um, but is an agent going to be able to create a strategy, backtest a strategy, deploy a strategy, and allow you to interact with it as that strategy's being executed? Yeah,
mhm.
like 100%. And um, that's certainly something which we're continuing to build into.
Right, yeah. I know, it's interesting to think of a time where that would just be the norm, everyone interacting that way. Very different from now.
Yeah. But it's already the case, right? Like
Yeah,
you think about your own user behavior. I
mhm,
mean, I booking a flight the other day, I just did it through Claude.
yeah,
Like not every part of the workflow,
mhm,
but like the odd parts I just did through Claude.
yeah. No, absolutely. Um, all right. Well, is there anything else that we didn't cover? Whether it's like
I think the
features
big one
or
is we spent a lot of time talking about agentic trading, but the other big one which we did touch on is RWAs. And
yes.
and actually if you think about how trading in crypto is evolving,
Mhm,
um, fine, like every bull market there's stuff that pops up that people really want to trade.
Mhm.
So we kind of had like NFT cycles, meme coin cycles, like the stuff always
Yeah.
happens. So not about to disappear; it's just going to reappear at the next cycle
Mhm.
in some sort of like left field version that you've never thought of.
Yeah.
Um, and it's what is quite fun and exciting. It brings a lot of people into the space. So that's still going to be there. But what actually is, from a personal perspective, I see as like the biggest area of growth for crypto as a whole and for us as an exchange is actually bringing these TradFi assets into the exchange such that they themselves are tradable.
Mhm.
And yeah, we definitely touched on this a little bit, but commodities, equities, FX, basically every single market you can possibly imagine in the world should be available and accessible on chain to every single person in the world,
Mhm.
right? Like, and that's what we're really building into, and it's going to be a really big part of the second half of this year for us.
Okay. That's really exciting. Yeah, I really like the accessibility point on that. I've had a few projects on the show in the RWA space, and a lot of it is about that. It's sort of giving people access to products that traditionally, aren't available for like everyday investors. And it's that problem's being solved in an interesting way with RWAs. So yeah, I think that's a bigger part of accessibility. Blockchain and crypto has done a lot in that sense, just by reaching people who are unbanked. But it's sort of, really expanding on that through this new mechanism.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, and that's our goal. We want every, like said, every single asset in the world that
Hmm.
to be available and tradable on Raya. And by definition, because it's a permissionless piece of infrastructure,
Hmm.
that is then immediately available to 8 billion people all at once. So
Yeah.
you think about impact and um, and democratizing access to financial services, it kind of ticks those boxes pretty heavily
Yeah,
from a
absolutely.
personal perspective.
Yes. And I was just at a conference, the Eve Wealth Summit, and there was a panel on institutional adoption in the space. And it was a really interesting conversation because someone was kind of pointing out, it's like, well, the reason that we have crypto and blockchain is really, it was in response to like obviously like the failing financial markets, in certain areas. It's in a lot of ways, it's sort of the antithesis to, the centralized traditional financial structure. So that's sort of where crypto and blockchain was born. And then you have all these conversations about, can, when, if, is there going to be this sort of mass institutional adoption? But the reason they're hesitant are for things like it's decentralized. There's no KYC. It's sort of all these. And is that ever really going to happen? Because, that's why crypto was created in the first place. So what are your thoughts on that? Like, where do you think that's going to land? Because I did think it was a pretty interesting one. It was an interesting debate.
Yeah, well, I think it comes just so I think a very large financial institution is never going to trade against an unknown counterparty.
Hmm.
The regulator is just not going to allow them to do that, and the benefit to them versus the potential cost is just like disproportionate
Hmm.
on the risk side versus the reward. Um, there are, particularly ZK proofs, there are ways in which you can have a single piece of infrastructure, i.e., Raya, service people who are KYC'd, but not necessarily revealing their identity. It's just that you're able to cryptographically verify that they are KYC'd,
Got it.
and they can use that same piece of infrastructure in order to transact with people on the other side who are also KYC'd. Right,
Okay.
so you can actually have an instance where you can have a single piece of infrastructure which can service multiple different user groups, be it permissionlessly and
Hmm.
um, permissioned, without actually kind of like taking that and yeah, forking it and sticking a different version of it in a regulated entity in the US,
Yeah.
right? Isn't it?
Nice.
So I think that's, I mean, whether it plays out like that, we'll
Hmm.
see. Um, at the moment, there still are a very large number of institutions who are wanting to access on-chain markets, who are happy to interface with a permissionless product. And like clearly that's the fastest area of growth for us as a business.
Hmm.
Yeah, long term, I think I don't necessarily think the solution that exists today is going to be one-to-one the solution that exists tomorrow
Yeah.
to address the issue around kind of know your customer.
Hmm. Okay. So yeah, that does sound like a good solution. And I'm sure as the industry evolves, there will be, more things evolving to meet the needs. But yeah, it was an interesting discussion for sure. So thanks for sharing your take. Okay, so as we kind of wrap up here, anything else you'd like to cover or is there anything that we missed that you wanted to touch on before we close?
I don't think so. If anyone's listened to this, they're interested in learning more about Reya, then go check us out on Twitter. His handle is Reya, REYA_XYZ. And yeah, I mean, like obviously go try out the product, and any feedback that people have, please open a ticket. We listen and read we listen to every piece of feedback. We read every single ticket. And we're obviously trying to kind of service users as best as we can.
All right, wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Simon. This was such a great conversation and awesome hearing everything you're building with Reya. Yeah, best of luck with
Yeah.
everything and yeah, everything you're working on this year.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. All right. Thanks so much. So that is it for today's episode of Token for Your Thoughts. If you enjoyed the conversation, be sure to subscribe and follow the podcast for more insights from the people shaping the future of crypto, Web3, and AI. We'll see you on the next episode.